The following presentation is brought to you by kmmedia.pro. Please visit kmmedia.pro for more information. Now stay right where you are as we present. Welcome to Positive Talk Radio, evolving ideas, one conversation at a time. Great guests, dynamic stories and interviews, plus new thoughts on a wide range of topics and concepts. I hope that you'll hang with me, Kevin McDonald, my friends, and of course, you. As together we work to understand why we are all here and what we can do to make our world a better place for all of us. To be happy, be kind, and live in peace together. Yep, that's Positive Talk Radio. Everybody, to another episode. No, don't adjust your set. You're not paying double. It's okay. My name is Kevin McDonald, and this is Positive Talk Radio. And over there's the Reverend Rob Lee, and he's co-hosting today because we have a very special guest today. He's an author, and he knows quite a bit about the subject that we're going to talk about today, as does Reverend Rob. And he's written the book called Breaking Bipolar. And if you've got an issue, if you think you have an issue or a friend, get the book. It's a very helpful way of understanding it. And one of the reasons why Reverend Rob is here is he's got a master's degree in social work and has dealt with a lot of bipolar people and issues and lots of destructive issues that people do. But first, I want to introduce. Rob, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am awesome. Thank you. Bangarang. What you put out is what you get back. There we go. I am great. How about you?
I'm awesome. Thank you. I love Bangarang. I've got to incorporate that somehow, but you say it so much better. Bangarang.
Bangarang. Yeah, it's amazing. And I think Troy's going to talk about, taking control, your intentions. Where are you going to lead? And I'm anxious to see where this goes. I appreciate Troy writing a book for people to help them with this. This is bigger than what people know.
And not only that, it is a personal story of his. So he knows this intimately because he has lived it. And Troy Steven, how are you, my friend?
Good, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, and thank you for writing the book. I think it will be very helpful to a lot of people, both people who have experienced bipolar disorder and other people who love people who have experienced bipolar disorder. And so we want to talk about all of that. So I guess I would ask, the first thing is tell us a little bit about your story of your life story and how it has affected you over your lifetime.
Sure. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and then backtrack to when I experienced bipolar disorder for the first time. But I'm an Indiana boy. I went to Purdue University, got an engineering degree, and then got my master's degree in engineering from North Carolina State. I was born in 1962, got married when I was 29, moved to North Carolina. I have 4 children. I worked as an aerospace engineer for over 20 years. And then when COVID hit, I started a publishing company. I published 26 books. So the first time I experienced a bipolar episode was in 1993. Ended up checking myself into a psychiatric hospital. I was there about 3 weeks. Got heavily medicated. I had a bipolar break while I was in the hospital. It was kind of a mania attack. Just hallucinations, being paranoid. Didn't know what was going on with myself. And, I was medicated since then. I've learned to be able to control my disease pretty good. I'm always leery of it, but I'm overcoming it now. I feel like I'm optimal in my life. I had 2 more episodes, where I ended up in the hospital, involuntarily commitment, first in 2005 and then in 2015. I got on the right medications and started following a plan to be able to overcome the illness, a whole life wellness plan. And I've been good since 2015. And now I live in sunny Satellite Beach, Florida.
Hey, we're right around the corner from each other. Holy crow. I moved from Melbourne Beach to Vieira. So,
Okay.
brother, we are. Yeah. So all I got to do is go that way and see and run into you. So congratulations. One of the first things I want to say thank you is, number one, showing people that you can have extended periods of just being in control of your life and whatnot, but that it does take a plan. So thank you. Can I ask you a question? What do you mind explaining what, because I know you said you're always leery of it. It's scary. What is one of those manic, were you hypomanic or were you hypermanic?
I was actually manic. I have bipolar 1.
Okay,
So
bipolar 1. Okay.
Mania and depression.
Tell me, can you give us an insight? Because for those of us that don't suffer from it, okay, it's a hard thing to understand. Can you let people know what it feels like to be in the middle of a manic episode?
Yeah, for me, it starts out slowly where I feel like I'm really cognizant. I know what's going on with my life. I really get along with people well. Everything starts going good, kind of ramps up. And before I know it, I'm into an episode where I start to be paranoid, have hallucinations. And if I don't do something quick, like calling my psychiatrist and getting an adjustment in my medication, then it skyrockets. And I end up 2 times in 2005 and 2015. When I got to a certain point, I told myself, I'm going to stop taking this freaking medicine because it's holding me back. I'm not being my optimal self. I got to do something about my life. And both of those instances, when I quit taking my medication, I ended up in the hospital.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of a slow ramp up, and then it goes faster and faster until I'm in, high blown mania.
Yeah, people don't realize with any medication, you should never just stop taking it because it can have adverse reactions, especially with antidepressants. They're on some of them require loading doses, some of them take a while to get into your system, and then your body starts needing it. And then when you come off of it, that I experienced one time, I had to go on antidepressants so I could share a little bit. And I didn't like some of the side effects. So I just stopped taking it. And I walked into my doctor's office. I was bawling, crying, everything. And he just looked at me and said, "When'd you stop taking your meds?" I was like, well, that didn't take long, And so again, what he did was he just started backing me off of it. You have to come off of it in controlled doses. And that's most medicines. So, please, folks, if you're listening, that is something very important to take away from this. You can't just self-medicate. And we think by coming off of it, I think people lose the idea that they're self-medicating by quitting taking medicine. What do you think, Troy?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of self-medication for bipolar people is substance abuse, like alcohol and drugs, marijuana. I smoked marijuana for years and years. Medicine, like you were saying, one of the weapons in my battle plan is optimize your medication. And like you were saying, that you go to your doctor and, I would always go in there, like, it took me a long, long time to find the right meds, but I would go in there like, I'm not satisfied. This is what's going on with me. I need to change my meds. And so when that happens, like you said, if I was like on 3 different medications, I've tried 15 or 20, then he would say, okay, I'm going to give you a new medication and take you off this medication. The medication you're going off of, in terms of being able to optimize your meds, there's a ramp down stage, like you were saying. You're taking 400 milligrams, and then he tells you go to 200 milligrams, wait a couple weeks, go to 100 milligrams, wait a couple weeks. So it takes a long time for it to go out of your system. And at the same time, you're on a new medicine, and he starts you out at 100 milligrams, let it go for 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, go to 400 milligrams. And then 2 weeks later, come see me. So this is a long, drawn out process. And
it's got to be frustrating as hell.
Yes.
So I got to ask you, Troy, the first time that this happened, what did that do to you? What was that? What did that feel like? Were you prepared for all of the everything that went on with it? Because that had to scare the hell out of you.
Yeah, it did. I was working at the time, but then I started getting paranoid and having hallucinations. My wife's a nurse, and we weren't getting along that great at the time. And I had hallucinations like she was giving me shots when I was sleeping because my back kept hurting. So I started sleeping in my lazy boy. Hallucinations, paranoia. I had two young kids, and it got to a certain point where I was starting to feel dangerous. So I decided to drive to Florida and hang out at the beach and try to hole up in a motel, figure out what's going on. I got a couple hours out of town, and I said I can't leave my children. I'm gonna miss my children. So I went back to Raleigh, North Carolina, went to the emergency room and told them what was going on, and they transported me to a psychiatric hospital. And then it got ugly, real ugly, where I had a psychotic break, heavily medicated. And after that, you lose all, judgment of yourself. You're, what the hell happened? Something's wrong with me. And when you're after they heavily medicate you and you get out of the hospital, your hands are shaking. You're slow in thinking, and you're trying to deal with what happened in terms of, okay, now I'm back and trying to heal things with my wife and my kids. And so it was a traumatic experience the first time around, and even the second couple of times around. But
Well, again, I'd like to thank you very much for writing the book and doing what, shedding some light on something that really is an important topic. And I know, Rob, you've experienced a lot of the same thing with substance abuse and with bipolar people and that sort of thing. So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
now what Troy was saying is exactly right. A lot of people go to self-medication, and this is going to be a problem that's it's going to go more mainstream, where if you don't have insurance, you can't get to your meds. You run out of meds. You've got to find a clinic and some type of program, because there's a lot of people out there fighting with the cost of the medication or being able to actually get the medication. And they want to take the medication, but they can't get to it. So they find something, somebody goes, here, try this. All right. I know in dealing with a lot of opiate addicts, okay, a lot of them did not wake up that morning and go, hey, let's become an opiate addict today, but a lot of their stories begin with, I hurt my back, I hurt this, I hurt that, but I can't afford my painkillers anymore. Or then the doctors went into this, oh, we're giving out way too much, but they didn't wean them off. They just stopped giving it to them. So they had to find something, and they did, and it winded up destroying their life. So they're trying to overcome it. I mean, Troy, what do you feel is something that people that are dealing with somebody that has bipolar 1 or 2, what do you think is important that they need to know in dealing with somebody that's diagnosed with this?
I think they need to, their partner or husband or wife have no idea what the person's going through. They need to learn about it. Maybe go to some support groups, that they have support groups for people that are, have someone that they know or love that is bipolar. I think they should recognize that sometimes bipolar people get violent. And so if some of that's going on, they need to distance themselves from them. And then, just don't be judgmental. Talk to your person that's bipolar and say, what's going on? How does it feel like? What can I do to help? That kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'd like to ask the two of you that because I I'm not bipolar. I've never had any of that. I think I know some people that have been bipolar, but I don't know. They've been not diagnosed. The first question I have is how many people are walking around in this country that are not diagnosed with bipolar yet have got behavioral issues, highs and lows, and all of that makes it a difference in the people's lives that are around them, but they've never gone to the point that they weren't having to be hospitalized, but they are still bipolar. What exactly? Describe what exactly. And I'll ask both of you. Describe exactly what bipolar is, and why is it so pervasive, and why do some people medicate and not have to worry about it? But what is it exactly?
Troy, take it, man. You lived it, so and did the research, put the book together. You take this one.
It's bipolar disorder is a mental disorder that it's not something that you can just get rid of or not treat or deal with. It's not going to go away. You're going to have to figure out how to deal with it. But it's just they have different mental disorders, and bipolar is definitely one of those. Sometimes a lot of times it's inherited from your parents or your grandparents. If you look back in your family history and you're bipolar, you'll probably come across someone that was bipolar as well. So it's definitely definitely a mental disorder.
And Kevin, one of the things is, that we've been using the word mania, things like that, feelings of euphoria. Okay. Just being up, less need for sleep. One of the things we can look these up. They're right online. And by all means, when you're looking it up, go to DSM. It's Diagnostic Statistical Manual 5, I think. I don't know if the 6 has come out yet or not. That's what it takes medically to be diagnosed. And this is like, going days without sleeping because you're hyper. All right. And then crashing. It can turn in from a hyper to a hypo, where all of a sudden you're sleeping for 3-4 days. You're crying. And a lot of times with some of this, there's a huge depressive episode that goes with it. So again, those of you dealing with where I say there's a lot more people out there that have it than what have been diagnosed with it, again, because of insurance and whatnot. And think about mental health and the importance. It's just now coming to, how important mental health is, but a lot of insurance companies still don't want to pay for it. When you look at your medical benefits and you say, well, if I'm having a medical episode, a mental health episode, they may only cover 6 visits. You may have certain out of pocket. It's not because it's different than I have a broken bone. I can expect this to be healed in X amount of time. You know how insurance companies like to deal in those solid numbers. Mental health, you can't do that. And this is it. So then when you throw hallucinations in on top of it, they're out to get me. Paranoia. I'm hearing voices, things like that. This thing is, no wonder people turn to street drugs to deal with it if they don't know what they've got, how they've gotten it, or whatnot. It's crazy. Troy, before the show, you had mentioned a number, and I'd like for you to talk about it. People with bipolar, because it's not something you're diagnosed with in an autopsy. Okay. So, Troy, you had mentioned the suicide rates amongst bipolar people.
Yeah, the statistics show that 20% of people who are bipolar commit suicide, and 20 to 60% commit or attempt suicide at least once in their lives. So it's a deadly disease.
Sure.
I wanted to backtrack to the prescriptions cost of medication. I would recommend people take a look at goodrx.com. There's one medication I take, Seroquel, 400 milligrams a day. If I didn't, I don't have, medical insurance, but it was going to cost me $400 a month for the Seroquel.
There you go.
Using GoodRx, it's like $35 a month. So that's a good place to look,
And the name of that again is, let's get that out.
It's goodrx.com, GOODRX.
Great app. I use it for people going through medically assisted treatment for addictions when they had to start paying for their meds and they went off of a government program so they could find it or whatnot cheaper. It's a great app.
Okay, so guys, I got a question for both of you, and because this has been stirring around my family for forever now. My older brother, who has since passed, he married a gal, and I won't use her name, but he married a gal twice, and their routine would be like they'd be together. And he would say, she's amazing. She's upbeat. She's positive. The sex is amazing. We have an awesome time. It's terrific. The next thing I would know, she was calling the police on him and having the police come over to the house and kick him out of the house. So he'd go back to his house, and they would not talk for a week or two. And then she would show up at his house with a casserole dish of spaghetti, an overcoat, and nothing else. Is that bipolar, or was she just kind of just odd?
What in the professional world we would say you gotta rule it out. Okay, it would be a rule out. There used to be a little notation we used to put on a diagnosis. It's rule out bipolar or rule out depression, whatever. You certainly would be like, there's your episodes, okay? And then how deeply she goes in to to depression or whatnot, what's happening, that's where we determine one or two, or if she's actually qualified for it at all. So imagine somebody that's right on the cusp because insurance companies want to see a number to be diagnosed with it. And if you don't match that number, the doctor's not going to write your script. So how many people are out there on this borderline, but they don't meet the diagnosis? So, I mean, wow.
There's not a medical test for bipolar. There's not a blood test. It's all based on your moods and tracking, highs and lows. So you go to see a psychiatrist, he's going to ask you a bunch of questions and try to ascertain what's going on with you. And there's probably like a script he follows. Is this person bipolar or not based on all his questions? But there's not a medical test. So it's hard to say, it's hard to tell somebody they're bipolar and for them to believe it.
Well, in her case, she would say, no, I'm just in a bad mood, but she would go through the period of depression. And also, by the way, and I want to ask both of you this, she was also very promiscuous. When she kicked him out, she would only come back after she'd exhausted the people that she had met in between that she wanted to try and have a relationship with. So there's promiscuity and sex and highs and lows, and you love somebody one day and you hate them the next day. Is that all part of it?
Absolutely. I've been very promiscuous in my life.
Yeah.
So it goes along with bipolar.
I've tried, but it hasn't worked out well.
Well, look who you look like. It's one of those things. Sorry. I went to Very Well Mind and .com just to see, make sure I had my head in the right game. Yeah. And one of the first things there for about mania going from manic episodes of increased sexual desire. So, yeah. Because again, think about it too. It's your brain is just completely out of control. And a lot of times the you inside doesn't like it. So you're trying to do things just to feel like you're there in control and part of yourself. I would like to take, I'm going to do my due diligence here. I want to tell people as we talk about this subject, remind people, check out Troy's book. But also, if you're battling some of this, in most cities and states now, there's a 211 number you can call, and they can help you find help for depression, for things like that. But if you are in a manic state and you're considering suicide, 1-800-273-8255. 800-273-8255 is the National Suicide Hotline. Please, we can't discuss this without getting that number out there. So, all right, that I just felt like that needed to be said for our people. Troy, what drove you to write this book? I mean, was it, needing to? Which side were you trying to help? Everybody?
Definitely everybody and myself. So I'm an engineer, so I wrote the book. It's a self-help book, and it has a kind of a process that you follow, a plan of attack. And so, I always wanted to write a book. I love to read, always wanted to be an author. I was working as an engineer, and then they tell you, if you're going to write a book, write what you know about. So I decided to write about bipolar.
Thank you for doing it. And there are going to be plenty of other people out there. Where can they find your book?
It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, a lot of iTunes. So I have an ebook, paperback, and a hardcover, and an audiobook, all on Amazon and Audible.
Awesome. So do you feel like you've beat it, or you're just managing it? Where are you at with your bipolar?
I think I'm beating it. My life is great. I could see the beach from my windows. I feel like I'm thinking optimally. I published 26 books in 2 years, but I'm always cognizant that it could come and get me. I need to be aware that if I start having symptoms, don't let them go on too long, but ask for help. One thing that's helped me a lot is I belong to a bipolar support group. I belong to one in Connecticut, and then in Raleigh, North Carolina, and now down in Florida. And actually just became a co-leader of the support group.
Good for you.
So that's a big help, and even if you don't even know if you're bipolar, but if you're scared and things are going on and you feel suicidal, or you just want to go to one of the meetings and check it out. They have the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. It's DBSA. You could Google it online, and you could put in your zip code, and you'll see meetings in your area. But support groups have helped me a lot, and a lot of times, I got out of the hospital. You don't want to go to a meeting, like this isn't going to help me. But every time I went to a meeting and came home, I was like, I'm glad I went.
Support groups are amazing for many different things: grief, alcohol, drug use, things like that. Sometimes we just need help. And I remember hearing people, Rob, I don't want to go to a group for the rest of my life. Well, but sometimes that's what we need. We need a help. You weren't dealt a square hand, and you got to deal with it. And sometimes you just need to find people going through the same thing and hear what they've done. And I'm so glad you wrote the book, and that people have a chance to get to it. That's just amazing. Kevin, you were also asking about how many people. I looked up the odds, and what they're talking about is like 1 in 120, a little less. I mean, when you think about it, a little less than 1% of the whole population, and that's a big freaking number. But that number jumps to 8% if your parents had it.
So, what's interesting about that is that, first of all, your first episode, Troy, happened in the 90s. Times are different now. I mean, I keep on thinking to myself, the 90s wasn't that long ago. That's almost 30 years ago. And so the times were different then than they are now, and their perception is different about mental disorders or mental disease or illnesses of that kind. Have you found that over time that it has people are becoming more accepting of the term? They're less feeling like it's a failing of some kind, that it's just a chemical imbalance. Are you finding that people are a lot more aware of mental disease and where it comes from, rather than being something that's shrouded in mystery and people don't know what it is? And that, are you feeling a little bit more comfortable in that?
I would say that these days, a lot of people are coming out and saying they're bipolar. Kanye West, Demi Lovato, Halsey, John Claude Van Damme. A lot of famous people in the past were thought to be bipolar, like Theodore Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln. The bipolar gene, I guess you could call it, is there's creativity is part of it. So when you're especially when you go into mania, a lot of famous people and Ted Turner, they've helped the world a lot and been able to overcome the disease.
Go ahead, Rob.
No, so I was going to say, Troy, what would you, if you could only tell somebody 3 things about bipolar, what would be your 1, 2, and 3? What to help them? Somebody with bipolar, like how to spot it, what to do about it, what would be your top 3? This is what you got to do.
My top one would be, even if you don't know you're bipolar or you are bipolar, that if you start ramping up and having an episode, get help as quickly as possible. Talk to your psychiatrist. I have something in my book. One of the weapons is called a contingency plan. That's I put in writing. There's a form in my book you could fill out. But part of my plan is I have a team, my psychiatrist, my oldest daughter, Rachel, and my uncle Bud. And they're well aware that's what's gone on in my life. They know what's going on. My dad was bipolar. They knew him. So if I get into trouble, that's one part of the contingency plan, is to call somebody and get some help.
So set up a safety plan.
Yeah, because you can't shake the number. 20% of people try to commit suicide who are bipolar. I would have to divulge that I did in 2005 after I had a big episode, went off my medications. I took a bunch of pills. Luckily went to the hospital and, survived. So that's it's an ugly disease. You got to take, that's number 1 for me, is to do that. Number 2 would be, I like to say that the motto, bipolar, heal thyself. So if you're bipolar, you have to take complete responsibility for the illness, learn all you can about it, have these plans in place for safeguards. I think you need to have a whole life wellness plan that you follow. That's why I call my book The Battle Plan. Consists of optimizing your medications, having a contingency plan, training your mind, read books from self-help gurus like Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements. So make use of self-help techniques to train your mind, because you need to have the thing about training your mind is when you're having a big episode, your mind's out of control, but hopefully what you learn will keep you from having an episode. And the third thing I would want to say is that, I'm doing good. A lot of bipolar people are able to manage the illness. Catherine Zeta-Jones, for example. Don't give up on your dreams. Just don't give up on your dreams. You can make them come true. You really can. In fact, when you're bipolar and all this bad stuff has happened, then it should make you go after it that much harder when you're doing well.
And thank you for saying that, because a lot of it is you can either lay down and just get knocked down, or you can say, this is the hand I've been dealt and I'm going to have to deal with it. And there are literally, when you start looking them up, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of very successful, popular people that have dealt with bipolar disease. And what's really sad, to bring that 20% number into light, when you start bringing up lists, you will not bring up a list that you won't have one or two people in there that you recognize for committing suicide. Ernest Hemingway, you know, it's amazing. And so, yeah, that's wow. And that whole, you can handle it. Healing is a powerful thing.
I got a question for you both. Is there a way, is there a medication that, because, we're talking about creative people, and sometimes when people are in their high stage and they're feeling good, and that's when they're most creative. Now, can we kind of just get rid of is there a pill or a medication that we can take to get rid of the downside and keep the positive side?
That's the crux of the matter.
Yeah. That's why people go off their meds. No. And a lot of times that's the leading thing I've heard about why they went off their meds. They stopped feeling, their emotions were muted or whatnot. Did you find that to be so, Troy?
Yeah.
And they just want to feel alive again. So they go off their meds, and for a little while, like, they're sitting across from me and they're bawling and they're crying, but they're happy because, wow, I actually feel whatnot. But then 3 days later, I'm getting a call that my person is in the psych unit. Okay. So it is just like what Troy said. I'm glad it's somebody stepping forward. We need more people like Troy to say, hey, this is it. Are there other ways? I know a lot of people with holistic medicines and things like that don't believe in meds. There are some physical conditions that do require actual medication. And I feel like bipolar is one. Do you have to stay on it forever? Maybe not. If you can find a way to control it and decrease using mindfulness, meditation, but it's a constant state of awareness, like Troy said, where he has to stay aware of what's happening in his life. And a lot of people don't want to live that way. So sometimes it's just better to stay medicated. So yeah, I wish there was an up and down med, but no, or just an up med, but no, there's not yet anyways.
Yeah, certain meds work for someone and certain different meds work for others. But I would say to the people listening that some people can manage their bipolar illness without medications by using supplements and eating right and like that. So if you're bipolar, and I'm not telling you, you have to take medications. In most instances you need to, but some people are able to deal with it without the meds.
Well, if you go down the rabbit hole in a matter like you're saying, Troy, that it can turn on a dime, and you could go down to depression very easily and very quickly, then you just have to be cognizant and just be aware. But when you're in that state, are you aware that you're going down, or is it just, are you so wrapped up in the paranoia and the hallucinations and all of that you don't at any point you don't say, uh-oh, here I go again? It's just like you're there. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, it takes, a lot of times you don't realize that you're starting to ramp up into a manic episode. There, in my instances, there'll be a couple weeks I've been mania, quit going to work, call in sick. And then I come to a certain point where I realize I need to call my psychiatrist and get something adjusted in my meds. But if like one time I tried to call her, left a message, couldn't get in that same day. And then when that happened, I just said, the euphoria mania, I just said, okay, I'm not going to worry about it now, and just started getting more and more manic. One thing I wanted to mention about a magic pill, I don't think there's a magic pill, but one part of my contingency plan is I talked to my doctor. I was having a manic episode, and I went to see my psychiatrist. told him what was going on, where I would be like, everything's fine. And then like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, everything went to heck, where I started feeling like I was out of control, maybe dangerous. If I'm in a Target shopping around, I feel like I got to run full speed out of the store. And when I told him about this, he told me one of my medications is Seroquel. Carry around a 400 milligram tablet with you in your pocket. And if this happens and you realize it's happening, take it right away. Chew it if you have to, to keep from having disaster happen.
What's interesting about that is if you had a heart condition and you'd had a heart attack and they give you triglyceride, that if you feel like you're having a heart attack, put it under your tongue. Nobody thinks anything about that. Yet when we have medication for mental issues or chemical imbalances in the brain, and let me ask you, because that's kind of what I think it is. Is this basically a chemical imbalance in the brain that the person had, the victim, I would call them, has no control over?
I would say yes. It's definitely a chemical imbalance in the brain.
And you're right. They have no control over it. A lot of this is this radical swing of emotions, and they really don't know why. That's the reason they can't test for it. Can't say it's chemical because they could pull a test and see, oh, these are out, this is out, different things. You're literally going, and this is another problem with this disease. It's reliant on self-reporting incidents. So if you go to the doctor, you have to be open and honest and truthful with how much this is happening. A lot of people will go into the doctor and say, well, they tame it down. All right, Florida, concealed weapons permit. They're afraid, if I'm diagnosed with a mental illness, I won't be able to continue to carry my concealed weapons permit. So they don't tell the truth. Different things like this. And we're all afraid. Think about being stamped with that as a stigma that you're seeing. And I'm glad that Troy is using the term psychiatrist. And I strongly, and I think, Troy, I think you'll back me up in this, encourage people. Your first step is to go to your doctor. But even with your car, if your transmission's out, you take it to a transmission specialist. You don't just let Joe Mechanic do it. Okay? And with mental health diseases, they need, because these medications, most doctors rely on about 26 meds, for their whole practice. A general practitioner has to spread those meds out over everything he or she may see. A psychiatrist is all mental health. So think about the diversity in that, okay? And being willing to go to a psychiatrist.
I have another question for you two, because this is a fascinating discussion. By the way, we're talking with Troy Steven. He's written the book Breaking Bipolar. You can pick it up at Amazon and any of the major booksellers. And it's really is important that you, if you have somebody in your life that you think may have an issue, buy the book for them. Give it to them for Christmas or whatever. But in any event, how does for women, especially younger women, less than 45 or whenever menopause hits, how difficult is the menstrual cycle and the does it play a role in it as far as the hormonal shifts of what happens during the month for people and for women? Does that play a role into their bipolar, and can it trigger an episode? Because I have a friend who's like once a month she spends time losing her mind.
Okay.
And then she comes back and is okay. Now has gone to a psychiatrist and has been prescribed medication for some of this. But does that play a role? It's almost like clockwork. It's like once a month she'll lose her mind. But Troy, in your research, does that play a role for women?
Yeah, that's one of the triggers of a bipolar episode
Aha.
for women. There's other major triggers like lack of sleep. A lot of people, when there's more sunlight, people do better, or might, more sunlight could trigger a manic episode. Less sunlight could trigger a depressive episode. And I'm going to jump into this real quick and then get back to your question. We haven't talked about depression with respect to bipolar disorder, and that's mania. People are more depressed when they're bipolar than they are manic, and more people commit suicide when they're depressed than when they're manic. But yeah, that's definitely, and I think it's about an even split between men and women having bipolar, being diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Yeah, it does. It's not gender specific by any stretch. Okay. And again, just like most things that are dealing with a trigger, an external trigger, trauma, getting put in a position, arguing, fighting, crying, being ramped up about something can trigger an episode where it starts, but people don't understand. They're like, okay, you got mad, just calm down. And I constantly say, when in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down? It just doesn't happen. Okay. And that's what a lot of people perceive it as, but they don't understand. It's like hitting the nos on a race car. It can, some of those episodes can literally boost you into that, and thus, like Troy said, with the depression as well. Grieving, losing someone, losing a parent, losing someone very close, losing a pet. A lot of those things can trigger it. That's why it's so, if I had it, and thank God I don't, okay, if you ask one of my exes, she would say I did. It's one of those things where Troy's triggers might be completely different than my triggers. So that's the other thing, is getting it individualized so people can see the person rather than a one-size-fits-all treatment.
So what's the difference between postpartum depression and bipolar?
Well, postpartum, their pregnancy has been involved. Okay.
Is that a major life event that can cause somebody to go into a manic or a depressive state? And if they have an underlying thing of bipolar, and then you introduce a baby, that could be a great big problem.
Right. And that gets into a whole series of, when did the depression begin? How long did it last? That whole thing. So, and that's another thing that a professional has to sit down and go, are we dealing with postpartum depression, or are we dealing with somebody that was bipolar? If they were diagnosed beforehand, it's just not easy. So it is one of those things, no matter what, when you start feeling that depressed, or you start getting these manic episodes or mania, whatever it may be, it's time to talk to someone.
Troy, would you agree with me that there are many, 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 many people wandering around our country who actually have some degree of bipolar, but are not diagnosed?
Yeah, I would say that. One thing that is very troublesome, I think 20% of people in prison have a mental illness, whether it's bipolar or not. So a lot of people are in prison because they have a mental illness where they should be treated, not being in prison. So that's,
a lot of people with these episodes wind up in jail because of what they were doing, and nobody recognized it. They just saw criminal activity rather than, hey, this person is in psychiatric distress. We need to get them to a clinic.
And I'll give you an example of that. I recently interviewed a gentleman that had a schizophrenic issue, and he was on a fishing boat in Alaska. And I don't know if you know how that works, but they work like 12 on, 12 off, 12 on, 12 off, and whatever. It's very dangerous work. And he forgot his medication.
Oh, crap.
And so he ended up stabbing 2 people. And rather than when they took him to court, he was charged with assault and stuff. And rather than getting him the help that he needed necessarily, they put him in prison and he spent 10 years in jail. And that didn't solve the issue. It was it was because he didn't have the medication that he needed to take. So that there's tons of stories like that, and that's why your work, Troy, is so important. That people can have a workbook and tell us more about the book. It's actually a workbook, right?
Yeah, it is a workbook. It's a battle plan comprised of 9 weapons. Make a contingency plan, optimize your medication, find the right psychiatrist, train your mind, train your body, how to recover from a bipolar episode. And then I have a section in there, what psychiatric hospitals are like, what you can expect when you're in the hospital. Knowing what you can expect is very helpful for you, stabilizing out and getting out of the hospital. And the final weapon is legal rights for people who have a mental illness. American Disabilities Act. If you could get fired and then have some recourse if you had a mental illness and you were fired because of it. So there's legal rights that are, like, also there's people can get, like, a loved one can have you involuntarily admitted to a psychiatric hospital. That's a legal thing there, right? So it's good to know about your legal rights. So this overall battle plan is really a whole life wellness plan that's based on the expert recommendations of the medical community. And so that's what the plan in my book talks about. And I hope it helps a lot of people.
As do we. The name of the book is Breaking Bipolar. The author, Troy Stevens. Get the book. It's a great. It'll be a great help to somebody. I wish my brother had it for when his wife wasn't standing there in just an overcoat, because then that's when the police got involved, and it was an ugly way to spend 20 years of his life, because he was on the same, and he didn't have bipolar, but he was on the same roller coaster as she was.
Oh yeah, they live it right along beside you.
And it's
right
terrible.
Along beside you.
Terrible. So Troy, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate having you today.
Thank you. I'll hold up a copy of my book.
There it is. Breaking Bipolar. How does it feel?
Thank you very much.
Let me ask you, how does it feel to be published author?
Oh, it feels good. I'm writing another book that's going to be published pretty soon. It's like a 4x6 little handbook with a lot of the concepts from this book that you can put in your pocket. It's called After Your Bipolar Disorder, Bipolar Heal Thyself. That'll be coming out in a couple months.
When it comes out, give me a call and we'll have you back on the show.
Oh, great. Thank you.
This is, and Rob, speak to this. This is an extraordinarily important topic that we cover.
Absolutely. Mental health is something very near and dear to my heart because there's so much to it. And we've got to make people, homeless people, we don't realize that everybody just drives by homeless people and think, oh, they're just bums. A lot of them are suffering because they can't hold a job. It's not their choice, but they don't have medication. They don't have things to it or whatnot. So thank you, Troy. Yes, this needs to be addressed, and it needs all the attention we can bring to it. But most importantly, people that suffer from it, they need to know there are other people out there and that there is hope.
And Troy, before we go, I want to give you the last word to be able to say anything that you would like to about your book, yourself, anything that works for you. You have an open mic.
If you're bipolar, get help. Take responsibility for the illness, for treating your own illness, and never give up. No matter how far you come down and how much you get beat up, get back on your feet and never give up. You can make your dreams come true.
I couldn't have said that any better myself. Thank you so much.
Bang right.
And I'd also like to thank Reverend Rob Lee for sitting into this episode. He is going to become a regular contributor, and we've got some announcements to make down the road. But first of all, I'd like to thank you very much. You've added a great deal to the conversation. It was great to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. I love being here.
And boy, are you a good-looking guy or what?
Damn, I didn't think it was possible for there to be, two like me.
Yeah, me neither. And so, but it worked out fine. So Troy, get the book Breaking Bipolar. And I want to thank you again. Troy Steven has been our guest, and he's going to make, like a lot of our guests, is going to make changes in the world of the changes that we need, all of them. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing, and stay right where you are, gentlemen, and I'll be right back. Thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of kmmedia.pro. Please visit our website, oddly enough, named kmmedia.pro, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to each other, because each other's all we've got. We'll see you next time.